Good evening, everyone. This is Heather Turner, the District 53 Social Media Chair, and today we are going to be talking about Twitter for Toastmasters clubs. Just a couple of quick things before we get started. We are recording this, and it will be available on the District 53 website, hopefully in a couple of days. If you have any questions, there is a bar to the right of your screen with a question bar, or you can actually chat with me as well. If you do have questions, please ask the questions as you have them, and I will try to address them near the end of the webinar. So Twitter is, I have to say, probably, and I know we put this in the comment about the webinar itself, one of the hardest social media channels to use and understand, but it's also one of the most useful. And it is useful for a whole variety of ways. Whether your clubs choose to use it or not is going to be entirely up to you, but I did want to show you some bells and whistles in the back end of it and some of the things you can do with it, and also some of the things that you can get out of it. So why Twitter? First of all, it is really good for search engine optimization. Twitter and Google used to have a partnership called the Fire Hose, which meant that tweets actually impacted search engine optimization. They shut it off a few years ago, and then they've actually re-enabled it since then. So it does help with SEO. So it is a good thing to have it if you're not, even if you're not going to actively use it. It is great for member retention and news. And when you say member retention and news, I would say people love to have their name in the news. They love to have their picture in the news, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on social media, whether it's in your newsletter for your club. So it is good for member retention, and it is good connecting with other Toastmasters. I've been using Twitter since 2009, and I would say that I've connected with literally hundreds of other Toastmasters around the world, and many, many hundreds of business owners and other people around the world that I would never have run into either online, in person, or on any other social media platform. It's a great place to go out and search for people. You can't really search within Facebook, for example, for location-based people. So I could go to Twitter and search for people that are tweeting in Cromwell, Connecticut, for example, or people that are tweeting in Hudson, New York. So you can actually reach out and talk to people and not even have to connect with them, but you can find them that way. And it really is, if nothing else, great for content sourcing, because there are a whole ton of public speakers, Toastmasters, very, very good people good at giving leadership advice and leadership information on Twitter, who are pushing their articles and their blogs onto Twitter, and also their personal content. One of the first things I recommend is, if you are going to set up social media for your club, set Gmail up for your club. That's really important, because I've seen so many social media channels that people have started at the club level that are connected to people's personal email accounts. And those people leave, or they forget how to log in. They may move to another state, sometimes another country, sometimes they pass on. And the club itself loses the connection and how to get into that social media account. The great thing about Gmail is, once you start it, you can have it forward to multiple people. You can have all of the officers be able to access this, and that information can get passed down into the oncoming officers team. So it's a really good way to manage pretty much all of the social media accounts except for Facebook. And Facebook, you do need personal accounts to administrate a Facebook club page, but I do recommend having multiple officers have administrative access to that. Again, just like losing a Twitter account access, I've seen a lot of club Facebook pages where one or two people, or maybe just one person, started the club page. Maybe they lost access, they moved, they're not involved with the club anymore, and the club cannot get into that Facebook page anymore. So the more people that you have access into that, the better. Gmail is a great way to do this, because if you're starting Pinterest, if you're going to start a YouTube channel, which I really highly recommend, and any of the other social media channels out there, having Gmail as a base access point is a great way to get into it. Now, I could walk you through the whole steps of logging into your Twitter account for the first time and setting up the account for the first time, but realistically, it's going to walk you through every step of that. So once you've set up your Gmail account or another email account that most of your club is going to make sure you have access to, it literally will walk you through every step of the way. All you have to do is hit next. So I won't waste your time with that one. Now, this is kind of a beginner's page. When you first sign up, this will actually be blank, and you can upload a logo, you can upload someone's profile picture, and you're going to have this header image in here. Twitter recently actually rolled out a new format, so it looks a little bit different. So some of my slides are going to have the older format, some of them are going to have the newer format. This is the newer format, but all of the bells and whistles within Twitter itself are going to stay the same. But you're not going to see anything. You're going to go, where do I go? How do I do this? What on earth do I do with it? And how do I find people? And that's, I think, where most people get bogged down within Twitter itself, because basically all you're seeing is a blank page. Now, one of the first things you want to do before you start anything else is start to customize your profile. So you're going to upload a header image, you'll click on Edit Profile, and again, it will walk you through all these steps. You're going to upload a banner image. It will give you a little bio that you can put in, and make sure it's linked to your website if you have a website for your club itself. That part is all done, usually only takes a couple of minutes, and then we go on to the next step. Now, the next step is if you want to connect with Toastmasters, which is a great place to start, there's a search bar at the top where you can actually just type in Toastmasters. And this is a great way to find Toastmasters clubs and also Toastmasters literally all over the world. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, and I could go on the thousands, but there's a lot of thousands in there in terms of Toastmasters on Twitter. Not all of them are active, but quite a few of them are. So I would start connecting with some of those. And once you start to connect with other people, you'll see how the process works. Now, this is what a kind of a fully fledged Toastmasters profile looks like. So we have our logo image here, we have a header, we have our bio, and we have our location, which is very important. And we also have our club URL to the website. Make sure you check the website. This is one common thing that I find a lot of clubs and a lot of businesses forget to do, is they make a typo in there, they miss a HTTP, sometimes an S, and the link doesn't work. So that's not really helping you much. But this is kind of what it starts to look like when it's fledged out a little bit. Now, when you do filters, you have all of these things when you're searching. And this in here is called a hashtag. So it's the number sign and Toastmasters. And hashtags I'll cover a little bit more in a couple of minutes, but for the purpose of this, you can also use it to search. And there's a variety of different ways that you can search for things. So you can search for top, which will bring up the top tweets. You can search for the latest, which is usually the best way to find people that are active. You can search for people, which is generally not a great way to search for people because it won't necessarily bring up the people that are necessarily active recently. The last time I searched for Toastmasters and I searched for people, the top 10 people that had actually brought up, some of them were clubs, actually hadn't tweeted in quite a while. So if you want people talking specifically about Toastmasters or any other topic like public speaking, fear of public speaking, leadership, anything that can be a keyword that you're going to be searching for, using latest is the best way to search for things. Now, hashtags actually started on Twitter, and they've kind of migrated on to all of the other social media channels. And Twitter's interesting in that you could search for Toastmasters or you could search for hashtag Toastmasters, and it will still return the same thing. On Instagram, for example, it will not. Instagram had kind of adopted Twitter's hashtagging. And now if you search for Toastmasters in Instagram and you search for hashtag Toastmasters, you will actually come up with different results. But in Twitter and in Facebook, you will come up with the same thing, regardless of whether you actually put that hashtag in the front of it. Hashtags are basically just making things searchable. They are not necessarily necessary in Twitter itself, but it does help because if you're talking consistently about things, if you are actually actively using it and you're talking about public speaking or leadership, you might want to throw some of those in there. Keep in mind, Twitter has a very, very short 140 character, I think actually they've opened it up a little bit, so it's a bit longer, but you still have a very short space of time in order to get whatever you're putting out there. And if you want to include a link to somewhere else, you don't necessarily have a lot of room for hashtags after that. So you just want to be careful of your use of space. Now, this is somebody that I recently followed. I actually found his blog and he had a Twitter link, so I looked him up on Twitter and he's fairly active on Twitter. Dave Mack has some really, really interesting blog posts and articles out there. And he sounded like an interesting guy. I liked his his interesting content that was out there. So I went and I followed him. Now, say I want to have a conversation with him. Now, the first thing that I want to do is go and see whether Dave actually converses with other people. So you have the option of seeing 3 different things. You have tweets, tweets and replies, and media. And media is not that important. Tweets is basically going to be everything he pushes out there in terms of content. Tweets and replies, if I want to have like a relationship, a civil relationship, obviously not the other kind, I want to go to tweets and replies and see whether he actually talks to people. And that's important because if I want to build a relationship with someone on Twitter, you know, whether it's professional or whether it's for Toastmasters or any other reason, I want to make sure that if I follow this person, and maybe they're following me back, is it a good follow? So is it going to be profitable for us? So when I look at tweets and replies, it will show me whether he has actually ever conversed with anybody. There's a lot of people out there on Twitter that just push information out. They just broadcast things, and they will never actually spend any time on Twitter. If you're following an account like that just to see what their content, to use what their content sourcing, that's fine. But if you actually want to connect with them, that's not necessarily a good connection because they will never actually connect with you. They might follow you back, but they'll never have a conversation with you. Now, I do have, let me go back here for a second. Right here down at the bottom, this is a recent tweet that he posted. There are these selections, and if I hit this, this is called a retweet or a repost. So what'll happen if I push that, I'll go to here. And I have this choice to repost it, and what happens is it reposts to my own Twitter account, but I can also add a comment. So I could add a comment that says, this is a fantastic article about 6 presentation tips. I really found number 3 very helpful. You do not have to add a comment. That is purely voluntary. People really do like it when you retweet their content and they're active themselves on Twitter. And they also very much like it if you add comments to it, because it says to them, you've actually read it, you've engaged with it, you've looked at the content. And a lot of times they will say, you know, hey, thank you very much for retweeting my article or blog or whatever else that they posted. So it's a great way to have engagement on here. Now I can like it, and the only thing that liking does is it stores it on my own Twitter account that I actually like that post. Dave will actually get a little notification on his Twitter account that I liked it. So if you're looking to drive engagement with people, so maybe you've tried to chat with them casually, you've retweeted them, you've reposted something and added a comment, and you're not getting an activity from them, but it looks like there's someone that usually converses on Twitter. If you start liking their tweets, and be selective with that. You don't want to go through and like every tweet. That's a little stalkerish. But if you like some of their tweets, they actually get notifications about that, and they can say, hey, this person, who is this? And then they'll check you out, and you can usually build an engagement and relationship on Twitter with that person. Now, direct message, this is an interesting one because it used to be that you had to be mutually connected to direct message each other. So if I followed Dave, but Dave didn't follow me back, Dave could message me, but I couldn't message him back, and vice versa. If we had mutually connected with each other, so we followed each other, we could direct message each other. And they have rolled out an option a couple of years ago where you don't necessarily have to follow someone in order to direct message them. I personally don't really like this because if you aren't spending a lot of time on Twitter, if you have someone that's interested in your club who wants information about your club, say, hey, when are you meeting? Can you tell me about Toastmasters? And you only check Twitter once a month, you're going to lose that engagement from people. It also tends to generate some spam. Mostly it's used by big companies for customer service. So Cox Cable, for example, has the direct messaging app, so they don't have to follow me and I don't have to follow them. But if I have a problem with them and I don't feel like being, gripey about it online, I can actually message them with a problem and they could message me back and try to connect me with customer service. So it is useful if you're going to be on Twitter a lot to enable that, but that is entirely up to you. Just make sure that you would check it often if you have that enabled. Now you can also reply to him. You have that option of replying to Dave, and basically, you can say, hey, Dave, I really love that, or hey, Dave, how are you today, or whatever you would like to say. Now, you don't have to follow someone to message them, or I'm sorry, to tweet to them. They don't have to follow you to message them, to directly tweet them. You can have a conversation with someone that completely out of the blue that lives in Africa or Japan or China, for example, or Russia. And you don't have to be actually connected, but you could actually have a Twitter conversation online with each other, which is actually really, really neat. Because if you're looking for something like information online, if you're looking for content sourcing, it's great for news, for example. Whenever there's something that happens in the news that I want to stay on top of, I actually go to Twitter as the first, kind of point of origin for that. There's something called lists, well, I'll touch up in a couple minutes. We actually have a news feed of all of the local news. So it's kind of up to the minute traffic, fire, safety, everything goes into this. And I can figure out, what the fire engines are going on 2 miles from my house. It'll pop up in my Twitter feed. So there's a lot of useful things that you can find out in it. But it's great for engagement because, again, you can reach out and talk to somebody that, you wanted to source somebody in Cromwell, Connecticut, for example, that happened to tweet, hey, I'm looking for some help with public speaking, and you happen to put that in the search bar, you can have a conversation with them. And that's kind of a neat way to look at it. So this is what it looks like when I tweet to Dave. So I would just hit tweet to, and then his name would type in, or his name would pop up, and then I would just type in my message and I would hit tweet. You also have the option of adding photos, you can add a poll, you can add your location to this, or you can add a GIF. So if you wanted to be silly, or you were talking about Toastmasters and had a funny GIF that you wanted to add, you could probably add that in here too. Now, one of the things that you want to check is when you start building a kind of Twitter presence is checking out mentions and checking out follows. So for example, recently, I haven't checked this in a week or so, but this was my recent mentions, and these were some recent follows that I had. So these were people actually replying to me on Twitter, and these were some new people that followed me. And I always try to stay on top of that because from a club standpoint, if you have people following your Toastmasters Twitter account, they're interested in Toastmasters for some reason. Very occasionally, you'll get a spammy tweet or a spammy, Twitter account, but most of those people are reaching out to you. And it's important, if you're going to actively use this for the club, to go in fairly occasionally and just check if you have a new follower. And if they look like they're active, if they look like they're, a couple of towns away from you, absolutely follow them back and maybe have a conversation with them. Hey, can we help you? Anything about Toastmasters? Thank you for the follow is always a nice way to build engagement with someone. It's very much like meeting someone in a networking event. So it's a very casual conversation. So mentions is important to look at. You can also have an extended conversation with someone, and you can also pull someone into the conversation too. So I could talk to Karen, my friend Karen Thorne, for example, but I could also pull Huddlestone's Hideaway Bed and Breakfast into this conversation also by adding their Twitter handle, so this Hideaway, when I was replying to Karen. So then we can actually have a Twitter chat. And this is actually kind of fun because if you look for Toastmasters Twitter chats, there's quite a few of them going on all over the country quite often. And you'll see, 5, 10, 15, I think the last one I saw last month had about 30 people actually back and forth talking about leadership, which was really, really interesting. Okay. Now, one of the things that's important is to make sure you don't lose access to your account. Now, you can have a Facebook feed. So if you're not going to actively use Twitter, you can actually use it to broadcast things, which will help your search engine optimization, but it will also help get the general word out about Toastmasters if you're a district, if you're a division, an area, or a club. So this is a good example, unfortunately, of one that we've lost access to, and we will hopefully regaining shortly, but I wanted to use it as a good example of a feed. So if your club is using Toastmasters consistently, you can set it up so that anything that you put into Facebook actually will automatically feed into Twitter. So it will help your content in Twitter and it will help your search engine optimization. That's really, really easy to set up. So when you go into Facebook, you're going to type in facebook.com/Twitter and then hit enter. And you have the option of linking your club page to a Twitter account, and it will ask for authorization like this. You authorize the app and off you go. And that makes it very, very easily to actually build content into the Twitter account without actually actively using it. Now, does anybody have any quick questions so far? Okay, there is a good question, and actually that was right what I was going to cover right now, is you do have the option when you hit Facebook to Twitter of linking your personal account to your Twitter account. If you make a mistake, which is what the question is, you can unlink it. And when you first link it for the first time, you're going to see your personal Facebook profile here, and then you're going to see the Twitter account that you want to link it to. If you hit this by mistake, you can do undo. Just make sure that it's the club page that you're actually linked to. Okay. Now, if you're going to use Twitter as well, make sure you advertise it, especially if you're going to use it actively. So they do have in Free Toast Host, you do have the ability to add your Twitter link to the page. If you have a club email that you're using, or many people, I've seen a lot of people that are club officers have actually added their club information to their email signatures, which is, I think, really neat to see. But you can also add your Twitter and your Facebook and any other handles that you are on, so that people know that you guys are on Twitter actively. So make sure you advertise it. Now, I like Twitter because, again, it's so neat for content sourcing. There's so much information that goes by a mile a minute on here. But in order to kind of define down what you're seeing and reading, if you start actively using it all the time, so like I follow quite a few people, for example, if I was to search specifically for something that was just Toastmasters related, I'd probably be scrolling through my Twitter feed, which is a lot like a Facebook personal feed, for probably quite a while trying to find something specific about it. Now, you don't have to do that. You do have the option of having lists. But before we touch back on the list, which I mentioned a minute ago, I want to go through kind of the pros and cons of when people follow you and when you're looking for followers, some of the things that you need to look for. And that's important because when you search for Toastmasters, you might find some Toastmasters and some Toastmasters club pages, Twitter accounts that aren't active, and following them isn't going to actually help you at all because they're probably not going to follow you back, especially if the last time that they were actually on Twitter was 2 years ago. So following, I call those an empty account. So I always look at my new following people, and the first thing I do is actually click on them. And I see when was the last time they tweeted. So this person followed me, and in my case, they're local. This is actually somebody that I met through SCORE recently, and they are active. I look at tweets and replies. He's just starting to learn how to tweet and reply. Looks like a good business owner. He's following people nicely. He's being nice in his tweets. He's putting out good information. I'll follow him back. Now, this is another one that's followed me, but he's never tweeted, and he's following a whole bunch of people, and he's from California. I don't know him. Why on earth would I follow this person back? Because I have no idea who this person is. Now, they're following someone else that I know, so maybe it's a mutual connection, but until they've tweeted, I'm going to leave that one alone. You do have the ability to block people, and when you block people, it bumps them off from following you. So if you have a weird account that's following you that doesn't quite look great, you do have the option over here by the follow bar. There's a couple little dots, and the little dots, there's a little box that'll pop up that says block, and then unblock them, and that'll stop them from following you, or you can leave them blocked. Now here's another one, for example. Oops, let me go back right here. So the last time they posted was February 24th, for example. They just did recently follow me. So in their particular club case, I followed them back because it meant that they were actually going back to maybe start using it fairly actively again. Usually though, if you're looking for people and I came across this Twitter account, like I was searching for Toastmasters clubs and I came across this Twitter account, I probably would not put this one on my list of people to follow because it doesn't look like they're very active. But in this particular case, they followed me recently, so I followed them back. Now, I also look at, is this person going to be a potential club member? Are they going to be a potential visitor? You know, in this particular case, this is somebody that actually followed my personal account, and they also followed my club Twitter account. And I wasn't quite sure why, because they didn't really have anything in common. So I looked into, you know, who they were. You know, I clicked on their website, I looked at where the phone number was originating, and it turns out that the company was not somebody that I really wanted to have anything to do with, so I passed on following them. They weren't anything that was necessarily negative, but wasn't anybody that I was necessarily going to have a conversation with, because again, I looked at their tweets and replies, and they've never ever replied or tweeted to someone. So basically, they are using their Twitter account just as a broadcaster. If I followed them, the chances are that I would probably get a sales message directly messaged to me. Now, one of the things in terms of direct messaging, I prefer chatting with someone kind of publicly. If you have someone that is a potential member, I do want to caution you, if you follow them and they follow you, so you have the ability to direct message each other back and forth, is don't spam them. Don't say, come join our club is the best. I mean, some people do have the best clubs, obviously, but you know, ask them questions. Hey, thanks for following us. Is there anything that we can help you with? Or is there anything we can help answer? You know, don't try to jump on them. That's taken very, very negatively on Twitter, whether it's publicly tweeted or directly messaged to someone. So you just want to be kind of gentle and kind in terms of dealing with people on Twitter accounts. Now, this is actually a list, and lists are probably the most useful part of Twitter. If you're not going to use Twitter actively, it is a fantastic place to content source. So if you're using Facebook fairly often for your club, looking for new content for posting on your Facebook page, go to Twitter, because this is such an awesome place to go. Now, I have different lists. I have 50 odd lists that I've made up of people. Some have Toastmasters, some are business owners, some are friends, some are just business sources that I really enjoy reading their content. I have different categories, so I have groups of local people, for example. I have all different categories and different lists. And what a list does is it lets you follow their tweets. It doesn't necessarily follow that person, but it follows their posts. This is an easy way to just be able to aggregate information, because I can go to my list and I can scroll through a list that's public speaking or leadership, or in this case, Toastmasters, and I can find all of the things that are related to Toastmasters. Or I can find all of the people that are Toastmasters that are tweeting. So this is an example of some of the lists that I have. I have private lists and I have public lists. Now, private lists are something that I can only see who is on that list. And for the purpose of Toastmasters, I'm not even going to go into the pros and cons of that, but just wanted to show you that as an option. I can't really see any reason why Toastmasters would use a private list. Most of the lists out there that you would use is public, but when you go to start a list for the first time, you are going to have that option. And you can also be on other people's lists. So I have a lot of people that have added me to my lists. And before I go off topic, does everybody kind of understand the list feature? Because sometimes this is a little bit where I lose people, and I want to make sure that I'm explaining this one properly. So speak now. Okay. So in terms of lists, so here is a private list that I have, and these particular people are Toastmasters that are just broadcasting, like Darren LaCroix, for example, which I respect highly, is just broadcasting Toastmasters public speaking and leadership content. And I'm not really sure why I made this one particular private, but it has very few members on it. So I'm condensing and aggregating information from 17 clubs and 17 speakers out there, so that anytime I wanted to cherry pick information to put into Facebook or any other content out there that I wanted to stick it into, I could just go to this list and pick out. So he just wrote a great blog the other day, for example. So I could go to my Facebook club page and say, hey, Darren LaCroix wrote this great article on 10 steps to better leadership. Here's the link. This is why I thought it was fantastic. And you can also follow other lists. And one of the things that's important, especially when you're diving in to Twitter for the very first time, is don't try to recreate the wheel. There's a ton of Toastmasters on Twitter already. There's a ton of Toastmasters lists out there. So when you start finding Toastmasters, start looking at their lists, and you can also subscribe to their lists. So you could subscribe to this list, or you could subscribe to the list that I have of Toastmasters, and you can more easily find people. And if you didn't want to find people, you could more easily find content out there. You can also find local things. So I know, for example, that a lot of people have done lists that are area based. So I know in the Albany area, for example, just to pick one out of the blue, Albany has quite a few Twitter lists based on area people and also area businesses. So if you were a club in the Albany area, you could go into Twitter and you could look specifically for people that were actively tweeting from the Albany area, and you could see if, hey, any of these people might be interested in Toastmasters, for example. So it's great being able to target by location and also target by topic. Now, here's another one that I find very interesting. Swords Toastmasters is in Dublin, and they have something called a Paperly set up. I have a Paperly set up on my own account too. Paperly is a condensation and aggregation of many lists and also of many people. It's also free. This is something that you can use for a couple of reasons, or a couple of ways to use it too, is you can use it to aggregate content and post automatically on your Twitter account, and also aggregate information, again, so you're aggregating content for your other social media channels. And Paperly is really easy to set up. It changes content daily. So anytime you're looking for information, you can just set up your own Toastmasters Paperly daily, or you can go out and find the hundreds and probably thousands at this time of other public speaking Paperlys, and they're all aggregates. So they're all aggregating information that's together. So you could throw Twitter completely out the window if you wanted to and just use Paperly to source content. But it's a great way to tie it into Twitter because you're putting information out there. Now, when you're creating a list for the first time, similar to going to find people for the first time, you're not going to see anything. And this is what you're going to see. You're going to see create a list, and you'll title it, you'll put a little blurb into it, and then that's it. You hit next, and you can make private. This is what I had mentioned here. Now, say you came across me and you wanted to have a Twitter chat with me, or you just wanted to follow my tweets, but you didn't want to follow me, which is completely fine. You can add me or remove me from a list. So that means anything that I tweet and anything that I push out is going to go into that specific feed on your Twitter list. And I can also go and view my list too. So if you wanted to go on my account and see the Toastmasters list with a couple of thousand people and follow it, you have that ability as well too. Okay. And so this was a new account, for example, that I started. So you can just add them to the specific list. And if you have multiple lists, you can add people to multiple lists, which is kind of neat. So if you had people that were professional public speakers and Toastmasters, you could add them to 2 different lists, or you can add them to 3 different lists. You can add them to as many lists as you wanted to. Okay. Now, in terms of content, what do you post? You can post the same thing on Twitter that you can on Facebook, or if you have the automatic feed set up from Facebook to Twitter, you will be posting that. But pretty much anything is fair game. So posts, comments, videos, photos, anything that's in the news and anything that's Toastmasters related. If you're specifically using it for search engine optimization, the more keywords that are public speaking, leadership related that you can put in there, the better. But it's not necessarily, you don't have to be concerned about putting it into every single tweet. Okay, speech contests, very much the same thing. If you go and you look at other people's Toastmasters Twitter accounts and you look at other people's Toastmasters Facebook accounts, you can really see that the content is very much the same, and you can add multiple pictures to it. And I like this because it's a great way of showing love for your club, you know, showing people, as they can see in this particular tweet, she was thanking a couple of different people to support and adding a hashtag in there. So it's a great way to kind of, you know, show appreciation for your club and also your club members. Okay. Now, you can just put a quote in there. You can put a comment to someone. You can have information about your club. You can have pretty much any content in there related to Toastmasters, public speaking, and leadership. So basically, there's nothing that you can't post in there, obviously, as long as it's polite, because we do want to make our Toastmasters clubs as civil as possible, obviously. So, but pretty much anything is fair game in terms of content that's out there. Okay, now tell your club members about it. Not everybody is on Twitter, but some people might get into it. If you have people that want to learn it, it is a very, very good business skill to learn. So you can encourage people by saying, hey, you know, you don't know Twitter yet, but if you are working in marketing or you have your own business, or perhaps you just want to help the business that you either work for or you own better, being on Twitter can be extremely helpful. It is good to learn it. So get them involved with it and ask them if they are on Twitter. Ask them to follow the account. Ask them to repost, retweet their posts. Again, add it to the signature of your club emails, to the website. And then if you're doing club newsletters, if you're doing anything else where, you know, even agendas, for example, where you might have potential guests that are on Twitter, take that content home with you, or you're doing flyers and you're actively using Twitter, put it on any print media that you have too. If you're using Facebook, you can, in the back end of Facebook in the About section, you can link to your Twitter account. If you're using YouTube, you can link in the header of YouTube to all of your other social media clients, including Twitter. So just make sure people have it. Okay. And there's a question, if someone responds to a tweet and it is extremely inappropriate, can you remove their response? You cannot remove their response. You can delete your tweet. You only have the ability, unfortunately, to delete your own tweets. But if it's extremely inappropriate, I would recommend blocking them and also reporting them and deleting the tweet itself. Okay, does anybody have any additional questions? Okay. Now, if you have any additional questions, you can also find me on Forfang pretty much anywhere, or you can email me. I know my email address is connected to this webinar, so you can email me that. So thank you everyone for attending, and have a fantastic night. Thank you very much.